please share your views about the transgenerational epigenetic inheritance theory that you can inherit stress from your parents and the idea that your environment can actually change your DNA?
Okay, well, we can't call it a theory because it's been proven. So these are facts. Transgenerational epigenetic inheritance is basically transgenerational, meaning that it's transported throughout the generations or genealogies, out the gene expression of a people. You know, transgenerational. Epi means to be above or outer. Genetics. So that and inheritance. That means that we are inheriting things that are beyond our deoxyribonucleic acid, or that are beyond our genetic expression, but we still expressing it genetically. Meaning that there's some type of genetic marker from our ancestors. It's crazy when you read the Bible. The Bible say that that the Creator Yahweh will curse the children down to the 3rd and 4th generation. Then if you read in the book of Deuteronomy, it talks about how the ancient children of Israel actually inherit the curses for the sins of their forefathers, right? Well, we can actually prove this scientifically. First, I want to talk about the rat experiment. There was a rat experiment that was done in 1990. 1992, remember, is when they found the meridian pathways. But 2 years before that, in 1990, it was another two, they weren't French, but it was another 2 scientists where they got about a few hundred rats, and they took these 200 rats, and then they put them in an isolated environment. And what they did was they let them smell something called orange cherry blossom fragrance. So these rats, they smelled orange cherry blossom fragrance, right? Every time they smell it, they will give them an electrical shock. So they hooked them up to like these electrical pulses. And every time they would smell this fragrance, that would electrically shock them. It got to the point that they were so scared to smell this fragrance, right? Well, these were all male rats, 200 male rats. These 200 male rats end up having pups. End up having baby rats or baby mice. Tell me why that the baby mice will smell the same smell without being hooked up to the shock, and they would avoid it. Not only that, the baby noses, the neurons that actually connect with their smell sense in their nose had magnified. They got bigger and bigger. So they can smell this smell from meters off and would avoid it all. Like they would avoid the smell in generally. So what the doctors did, they sat back and they said, whoa, hold on, we seeing something here. Because it didn't change the genes, it changed the way that the DNA read the genes. So DNA go through something called transcription, and basically the DNA reads itself. So it goes through transcription, and then after it goes through transcription, it goes through something called translation. The translation part is the reading part of the transcription. So what they noticed was that the rats read the actual genes differently, even though the genes was the same. Since the genes was messed up, and every time that these father rats smelt this for so many generations and they got an electrical shock from it, when these genes was passed to the sperm and the sperm actually created a new rat or a new mouse, when they smelt it from afar off, it automatically read to their body as fear, and it took them through a state of fight or flight, where adrenochrome and adrenaline, or what you'll call acetylcholinesterase, was actually released inside of these rats, and they smelt fear from afar off, and they wouldn't even go in the area where this actual orange blossom was. Showing you that trauma, that fear, and that past experience and events can actually be transferred through your sperm cells or through the ovaries when you are actually conceiving and making a baby. So now let's back this up too. Let's go to humans. They did another study. This was somewhere in another different country. I can't remember the year, so I don't want to quote it. But basically, they looked at white males that went through famine. It was a famine that happened many years ago, and they noticed that the white males that went through famine, they lived longer. Their bone structures got stronger because the stress put on their body, it changed their molecular structure. It made them adapt to become like mutants. They got stronger. They wasn't hungrier. Yes, exactly. Built-in preservation. Literally, they was able to preserve themselves genetically. Well, check this out. They had children, and they children on an average lived 36 years longer than everybody else in that demographic. Not only that, their immune systems was very, very strong, or what I call the lymphatic defense system. Not only that, they didn't get colds, they didn't get viruses. And it was only the ones that participated in that famine. Anybody else that was outside of that famine, they died earlier. If a virus came through, all of them got viruses. All right, so let's keep going. What about slavery? And what happened to the so-called African Americans that's indigenous to America? and how we were prisoners of war, and how a people came over to the United States and they claimed they discovered it. But the people that they found here, which is my ancestors, they literally worked them and beat them and ripped them in half. They had something called breaking the buck, where they will literally do homosexual activities on the alpha males of the clans. They stripped them of their rights. They stripped them of their land. They will hang them for trees. They will sick dogs on them and let dogs rip them apart. And they children witnessed this. And this trauma was embedded inside of the DNA, inside of the genomes. So now today, when you look at the average so-called African American, we are naturally high in blood pressure, hypertension. That have something to do with the kidneys, the adrenals, and the heart. We're naturally high in diabetes. That has something to do with the kidneys, the adrenals, the heart, and the pancreas. We're naturally high in all these different stress-related diseases, even if we eat well. So what's happening there? Is that a transgenerational epigenetic marker that have been passed down through what our ancestors have experienced? The reality, yes, it is. So we see that it's very, very real, and there's too many scientific databases and analysis actually showing that these things exist. There is more than genetics that is just passed down. I know people be like, boy, you look just like your daddy, but you hear it from your grandma and your mother all the time. Boy, you act just like your daddy. Girl, you act just like your mother. Girl, you act just like your auntie. So we see that there's epigenetic, there's different types of events and emotional expressions that we can inherit, even talents. Notice usually if you have a father basketball player, right? They're super tall, 6'3", 6'4". Their sons come out super tall, 6'3", 6'4", wearing a size 16 in shoe, right? You already know he's going to be on the court. He's going to have mad skills, and he don't even have to really practice. He inherited that DNA. He inherited those talents.
I want to ask something also. We speak about this a lot. Do you think self-sabotage in the black community is kind of a result of that, in the sense that people are terrified of success and the exposure that comes with success?
That was going to be my fourth example. I was going there next. We're literally vibing right now. That was my next thing. So if all these things, if you can subject somebody to a smell, and you can give them an electrical magnetic shock, and you can have them so scared of smelling that smell again that they genes will mutate and they will change, because DNA methylation, and that's another part of DNA methylation, where the DNA changed to fit the environment. Then they have children, and you pass down them same genes through your semen, and you have these children, and these children have never smelt that smell in their life, but then they smell that smell, and it automatically give them a terrifying fear over their lives, where they won't even go near the area of that smell. What happens if you constantly tell your children, you ain't shit? You ain't gonna never be shit. Your daddy wasn't shit. Your uncles ain't shit. You ain't shit. This is gonna set in a psychological limitation on the brain. So they grow up to not be shit because it's been installed in them. Then they have children, and they children do the same thing. Now, I do want to keep it scientific, and I want to keep it like a clinical trial things. So even though it's epigenetics, there still is a outward validation or outward works that got to happen. So if you ain't shit, then there still got to be certain types of things that's going to react in your environment to show that you ain't shit. You ain't going to keep a job. But remember, this has been coming from your mother and your father. So it's the psychological oppression that you're going through. Now you're starting to act it out in the physical world. So now you got people around you like your children seeing. So even though they have that epigenetic marker on them, now they saying, dang, daddy ain't shit. Even though mama told him he ain't shit, daddy ain't working. Daddy is on the game all day. Daddy don't take out the trash. Dang, daddy still staying with mama. Dang, daddy don't have a girlfriend. Daddy don't have a life or goals. So then you start inheriting the same things. And the crazy part about epigenetic inheritance, usually we see what's going on and we hate what's going on, but we can't do nothing about it. And that's why, and we got a saying in the black community, don't become the things you hate. So yes, man, self-sabotage is crazy. And usually it's feeling that God particle in you, feeling that melanated carbon particle in you, knowing that you're great, but you just have these set boundaries and limitations, and you don't know where they come from. And you don't know that there's have been a limit placed inside of your DNA due to your ancestors or your foremothers and your forefathers being limited themselves. So we can't act like your ancestors and what they went through don't have nothing to do with what we doing today.